Hello everyone! Dear students, this is English language. My name is Marina ma'am and I will be your English teacher for a while. Today, dear students, we are going to talk about Tutankhamun. We are taking a trip to Egypt. These are the pyramids, and pyramids are perhaps the most recognizable symbol of ancient Egypt. It is still unknown how exactly were they constructed. These massive structures were built for 3 generations of pharaohs, and over the centuries, looters broke in and removed many of the treasures, just like at other places in ancient Egypt. There are many valuable things that ancient Egyptian civilization left us. For example, arts, architecture, writings, public works, cities, pyramids, organized government, complex religion, and some inventions such as black ink, papyrus sheets, the ox-drawn plow, irrigation, and so on. This is the River Nile. The River Nile today. The River Nile is the longest river in the world, and today it is shrinking in the face of several harsh environmental challenges, such as an exploding human population and continued exploitation along the river. All this has put a strain on the river, threatening ecosystems. Over 80% of the Nile's source waters have historically come from massive rains in Ethiopia. However, these rains are no longer occurring as consistently or frequently. Egypt's climate was much wetter in prehistoric times than it is today, and some areas that are now barren deserts were once very fertile. A number of names were used for Egypt in ancient times. A popular ancient name for Egypt was Kemet, which means the Black Land. Scholars generally believe that this name derives from the fertile soil that is left when the Nile flood recedes. The fertile soil was vital to ancient Egypt's survival. For almost 30 centuries, ancient Egypt was the preeminent civilization in the Mediterranean world. A civilization of ancient North Africa, concentrated along the lower reaches of the Nile River, situated in the place that is now the country Egypt. Starting around 5500 BC, 2 major kingdoms developed along the Nile. Historians call them Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Around 3200 BC, Egypt was brought together under one ruler. The ruler's name was King Narmer. This is recognized as the beginning of the Egyptian civilization. Ancient Egypt ruled territory outside the modern-day country's border, controlling territories which are today Sudan, Lebanon, Syria, Israel, Palestine. The country was also occupied by other powers, the Persians, Greeks, Romans. all of them conquered the country at different points in time. In the early times, as in other periods, most ancient Egyptians were farmers. They were living in small villages. Agriculture formed the economic base of the Egyptian state. These are some of examples of architecture. Mud houses and gardens in ancient Egypt. Over the time, the capital grew into a great metropolis that dominated Egyptian society during this period. Later on, quite many things have changed. And after some time, Egypt enjoyed a golden age of peace and prosperity. During the 3rd and 4th dynasties. Now, why did the kingdom collapse is a matter of debate among scholars. However, recent research indicates that drought and climate change played a significant role. During this time, other cities and civilizations in the Middle East also collapsed. It is assumed the reason was drought, a period of drought and arid climate, which hit the sites across the Middle East. The ruler of ancient Egypt was called Pharaoh. He held absolute power, and pharaohs were chosen in many different ways. The pharaoh made laws, waged war, collected taxes, and oversaw all the land in Egypt, which was owned by him. The Egyptians believed their pharaoh to be the mediator between the gods and the world of man. So after that, the pharaoh became divine. Pharaohs were looked upon as more than rulers. They were gods, chosen to lead people and maintain order, providing link between Egyptian people and their gods. Over the course of 5th and 6th dynasties, the king's wealth was steadily depleted, and during upcoming years, after the golden period of peace and prosperity, the kingdom and the rulers changed. All of the new kingdom rulers were laid to rest in deep rock-cut tombs like this one. The photo shows one of the examples from the Valley of the Kings. So all of the new kingdom rulers were laid to rest in these sort of tombs in the Valley of the Kings. The Valley of the Kings was a burial site on the west bank of the Nile River, and most of these tombs were raided and destroyed with the exception of the tomb of Tutankhamun. Today we are talking about Tutankhamun. This is also an image which shows the Valley of the Kings, a burial site on the west bank of the Nile. The rule of pharaohs came to an end when Egypt became a province of Rome, later on. Some things were very poorly documented, and some things are not clear even today. These photos are showing the tombs in the Valley of the Kings and the great ancient architecture of Egypt. One of the tombs discovered was a tomb of Tutankhamun. Today we are talking about Tutankhamun. And before we start, we will mention that this photo, for example, shows conservation work being conducted on the wall paintings of King Tutankhamun's burial chamber in spring 2016. So this is how the conservation work looks like. And this is King Tutankhamun's burial chamber. There were many things found in the chamber. Many things which they considered they want to take with them and use in afterlife. Navigating the underworld was vital to ancient Egyptians. They believed that the dead people could reach a paradise of sorts where they could live forever. That is why Egyptians' dead were sometimes mummified, preserving the body, and sometimes they were buried. They were buried with spells that aid them in navigating the underworld, and they were also buried with various things which they thought they will use in the afterlife. Tutankhamun was a pharaoh during ancient Egypt's New Kingdom era, about 3,300 years ago. The reason that Tutankhamun is so well known today is that his tomb in the Valley of the Kings was found early this century by a British archaeologist. His name was Howard Carter. The tomb contained gold artifacts and other treasures. Tutankhamun was around 9 years of age when he ascended the throne and became pharaoh. He ruled Egypt as pharaoh during these 10 years, and he was only 19 when he died. Although his rule was notable for reversing some religious reforms of his father, Tutankhamun's legacy was largely negated by his successors. Today, we are going to talk about Tutankhamun. The title of our story is Discovering Tut. The saga continues. Written by A.R. Williams. The saga means story. It means a long story of heroic achievement. Here we have some expressions, and we will explain these expressions as we read along. So this story is about Tut, Tutankhamun. He was just a teenager when he died. He was just a teenager means Tutankhamun was very young when he died. We said he ruled for 10 years, and he died when he was 19 years old. The last year of a powerful family that had ruled Egypt and its empire for centuries, he was laid to rest, laden with gold and eventually forgotten. He was the last heir of a powerful family. This family had ruled Egypt for centuries. After he passed away, he was laid to rest, laden with gold. He was laid to rest. It means he was put in a coffin. He was laid to rest. Laden means heavily loaded. He was heavily loaded with gold. There was lots of gold buried with him, placed in the coffin and in the chamber itself. He was laid to rest, laden with gold. Laden with gold means heavily loaded with gold. You can say a tree loaded with apples. It means tree which is heavily loaded with apples, which has many apples. So Tutankhamun was laid to rest, laden with gold, and he was eventually forgotten. Since the discovery of his tomb in 1922, the modern world has speculated about what happened to him, with murder being the most extreme possibility. So ever since his tomb was discovered in 1922, the modern world has wondered, has speculated about what happened to him. They were guessing what might have happened to Tutankhamun. Murder was one of the most extreme possibilities. There were some speculations that he was murdered. Now, leaving his tomb for the first time in almost 80 years, Tut has undergone a CT scan that offers new clues about his life and death and provides precise data for an accurate forensic reconstruction of the boyish pharaoh. Now, since the tomb was discovered, Tutankhamun is leaving his tomb for the first time in almost 80 years. Tut has undergone a CT scan. CT means computed tomography. The CT scan can reveal anatomic details of internal organs that cannot be seen in X-rays, in conventional X-rays. So Tut has undergone a CT scan. This CT scan will offer new clues about his life and death. We will find out more details about his life, about the way he lived and the way he died. It will provide precise data for an accurate forensic reconstruction of this pharaoh. It means CT scan will provide accurate, precise data, exact data, data which is correct in details. For forensic reconstruction. Forensic reconstruction is process of reconstruction of the face and body based on the information in the CT scan. It's a process of recreating the face and body of the individual whose identity is often unknown. So this story deals with the mysteries and various theories regarding the life and death of the youngest ruler of ancient Egypt, Tutankhamun. His tomb was discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter, and since then, this mummy has been subjected to an X-ray and later CT scan. These investigations, as we will see, have answered a lot of questions and offered new clues on his life and death. An angry wind stirred up ghostly dust devils as King Tut was taken from his resting place in the ancient Egyptian cemetery known as the Valley of the Kings. An angry wind. An angry wind indicates a strong wind. An angry wind stirred up ghostly dust devils. To stir up means to cause something to move up, or to move up into and through the air or water. For example, you could say, while moving the furniture, they stirred a lot of dust. To stir means to cause something to move up, like dust. Wind had stirred up the dust, the ghostly dust devils, as King Tut was taken from his resting place. From this first sentence, we can already see the atmosphere. The angry wind is stirring up the dust devils. There was a certain prophecy which said that whoever disturbs the tomb will be cursed. So King Tut was taken from his resting place in the ancient Egyptian cemetery known as the Valley of the Kings. Cemetery is a place where dead bodies are buried. In ancient Egypt, there was a cemetery known as the Valley of the Kings. We will see the map on the next page. Dark-bellied clouds had scudded across the desert sky all day and now were veiling the stars in cascade grey. Dark-bellied clouds. Dark-bellied means something which has a dark belly. Clouds are described as dark-bellied, as grey and heavy. These clouds had scudded across the desert sky. To scud across means to move or run swiftly, especially clouds, when clouds are scudding across the sky. It refers to moving swiftly from one place to another. It is used to describe the movement of the dark-bellied clouds. So these dark-bellied clouds had scudded across the desert sky. They moved swiftly across the desert sky all day. And now were veiling the stars in cascade grey. Now these clouds, these dark-bellied clouds, were veiling the stars in cascade grey. To veil means to cover. These clouds were covering the stars in cascade grey. Cascade means a box. The words cascade grey point out to the covering of the stars the way jewels are kept in a box. Cascade grey refers to ash-color clouds that hid the stars. So these ash-colored, dark-bellied clouds that were scudded across the sky were now covering the stars. They were covering the stars in grey. It was 6 p.m. on 5th January 2005. The world's most famous mummy glided head first into a CT scanner brought here to probe the lingering medical mysteries of this little understood young ruler who died more than 3,300 years ago. So it was 5th of January 2005. It was evening time, 6 p.m. when the world's most famous mummy, mummy means a preserved dead body. We know in ancient Egypt, some people were buried and some people were mummified to preserve the dead body. So, Tutankhamun was now the world's most famous mummy. And on 5th January 2005, Tutankhamun glided head first into a CT scanner. This mummy glided head. To glide means to move easily without stopping. For example, like eagle glides in the sky. So, Tutankhamun's head, the mummy's head, went first into CT scanner. This CT scanner was brought here to probe the lingering medical mysteries. Lingering means remaining, surviving, or persisting. It means lasting for a long time or slow to end. So this CT scanner was brought here to probe the remaining medical mysteries connected to Tutankhamun. CT scanner was brought here to probe the lingering medical mysteries of this little understood young ruler who died more than 3,300 years ago. In order to find something more about the way he lived and the way he died, CT scanner was brought here to investigate. So all afternoon, the usual line of tourists from around the world had descended into a cramped rock-cut tomb some 26 feet underground to pay their respects. That day, whole afternoon, there was a usual line of tourists. They would come from around the world to pay their respects. These tourists had descended means to go down, to come down. So they came down into this cramped means confined or restricted. They came down into this confined rock-cut tomb. This tomb was cut out of a big piece of rock. And it was some 26 feet underground. They gazed at the murals on the walls of the burial chamber and peered at Tut's gilded face, the most striking feature of his mummy-shaped outer coffin lid. So these people gazed, they looked fixedly at the murals. They all looked at the murals. Murals are paintings on the wall. They gazed at the murals on the walls of the burial chamber. Burial refers to the process of burying. Chamber means a room or a hall. So these people looked at the murals on the walls of this burial hall, burial chamber, and they looked intensely at Tut's gilded face. Gilded means thinly covered with gold leaf or gold paint. This face, Tut's face, was the most striking feature. Striking means obvious or noticeable. It was the most noticeable feature of his mummy-shaped outer coffin lid. His outer coffin lid, coffin means the place where the body was placed. Coffin lid, lid means cover or covering. Coffin lid means a box in which dead body is kept. This outer coffin lid, outer coffin cover, was mummy-shaped. We have seen the picture, and the face was the most striking feature. Some visitors read from guidebooks in a whisper. Others stood silently, perhaps pondering Tut's untimely death in his late teens, or wondering with a shiver if the Pharaoh's curse, death or misfortune falling upon those who disturbed him, was really true. It is said that some visitors read something from the guidebooks in a whisper. They were whispering, they were talking silently. Others stood silently. Now perhaps they were standing silently, pondering Tut's untimely death. To ponder means to think about something carefully, especially before making a decision or reaching a conclusion. So these other people who stood silently, they were perhaps thinking about Tut's untimely death. Untimely death because he died very young. So perhaps they were thinking about how is it that he died so young, in his late teens. Or perhaps they were wondering with a shiver. Shiver means tremble, shake or quiver. Perhaps they were wondering with a shiver if the Pharaoh's curse was really true. If the Pharaoh's curse was really true. And what was the curse? There was a curse that death or misfortune will fall upon those who disturbed him. So it is said that this was the atmosphere. Some people were reading from the guidebooks in a whisper and others stood silently. Perhaps they were thinking about why did Tutankhamun die so early, or maybe they were thinking about if the curse was really true. Is it true that death or misfortune will fall upon those who disturb him? Because now they might have felt they are disturbing him. They are taking him out of the tomb for the first time to do some CT scan. The mummy is in very bad condition because of what Carter did in 1920s, said Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, as he leaned over the body for a long first look. So Zahi Hawass, who was Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, he leaned over the body. He leaned over the body means he tilted forward over the body, he bended forward to see it closer. So he leaned over the body for a long first look and he said, "This mummy is in a very bad condition because of what Carter did in 1920s. Now Zahi Hawass was the Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities and he was worried. He was worried that the mummy was in a poor condition and that the CT machine might fail to produce a perfect three-dimensional image of the mummy. We will see what will happen and what will the CT scan show. But Zahi Hawass was very worried. He thought the mummy is in a very bad condition because of what Carter did in 1920s. Now we will see what did Carter do in 1920s. So Zahi Hawass leaned over the body for a long first look. Carter, Howard Carter that is, was the British archaeologist who in 1922 discovered Tut's tomb after years of futile searching. So Howard Carter was the British archaeologist who discovered the tomb after years of unsuccessful searching. Futile means fruitless. Its contents, though hastily ransacked in antiquity, were surprisingly complete. So the contents, the things that were inside the tomb, were surprisingly complete. They were still there, although they were hastily ransacked. It means they were hurriedly damaged. To ransack means to search in a damaging way, to plunder. So although they were disturbed in such a way, they were plundered, there was not much damage. They were surprisingly complete. Antiquity means very old objects. They remain the richest royal collection ever found and have become part of the pharaoh's legend. These remains, which were found in a tomb, they remain the richest royal collection ever found. Stunning artifacts in gold, their eternal brilliance, meant to guarantee resurrection, caused a sensation at the time of the discovery and still get the most attention. Stunning artifacts in gold. Stunning means extraordinary or remarkable. So these stunning artifacts, artifact means object of art made by hands. So these things which were found in a tomb, these stunning artifacts in gold, and their eternal brilliance. Eternal means everlasting. Their brilliance meant to guarantee resurrection. Resurrection refers to rebirth. It refers to revival after death. So these stunning artifacts meant to guarantee rebirth or revival. They caused a sensation at the time of the discovery. There was an uproar in the time of discovery. Sensation means stir, commotion, or uproar. It was a fantastic discovery, and most of the things were still there. And still, they get the most attention. But Tut was also buried with everyday things he'd want in the afterlife. Board games, a bronze razor, linen undergarments, cases of food and wine. As we know, in ancient Egypt, pharaohs were also buried with things they consider they will need in the afterlife. So, this is how Tut was also buried with everyday things such as board games such as chess. Chess is a board game. He was also buried with a bronze razor. A razor is an instrument with a sharp blade used for removing of unwanted hair. He was buried with linen undergarments. Undergarments made of linen. Linen is a fabric cloth made from the flax. It is used to make high quality clothes. And he was also buried with cases of food and wine. Boxes of food and wine, which they thought he will need in the afterlife. After months of carefully recording the pharaoh's funerary treasures, Carter began investigating his 3 nested coffins. So this investigation lasted for months, and after months of recording the pharaoh's funerary treasures refers to collections, the valuables, which were buried along with the pharaoh in the tomb. Funerary refers to a funeral. Funerary treasures. Treasures means collections of valuable objects. So after months of carefully recording and examining these treasures, these funerary treasures, Carter began investigating his 3 nested coffins. Nested coffins. Nested means fitted one inside the other. It means there were 3 coffins and they were fitted one inside the other. Coffin is where the body was put, where the body was laid. Opening the first, he found a shroud adorned with garlands of willow and olive leaves, with celery, lotus petals, and cornflowers, the faded evidence of a burial in March or April. So when he opened the first coffin, he found a shroud adorned with garlands. Shroud is the cover of the dead body, and it was adorned. It had garlands. It was decorated with garlands of willow. Willow is a soft wood. It also had some olive leaves. Olive is also a tree. Wild celery. Wild celery is a wild plant. Lotus petals and cornflowers. Cornflowers are bluish purple flowers of a wild plant. So he found these adorned scenes with garlands of willow and olive leaves, celery, lotus petals, and cornflowers. When he opened the first coffin, he found this shroud adorned with garlands. But these garlands were faded evidence of a burial in March or April. So seeing the certain plants that the shroud was adorned with, there was a faded evidence. There was a some evidence that the burial happened at particular time due to the usage of certain plants. So opening the first, he found this shroud adorned with garlands of willow and olive trees, wild celery, lotus petals, and cornflowers, the faded evidence of a burial in March or April. And then, when he finally reached the mummy, though he ran into trouble. There was some problem. The ritual raisins had hardened, cementing that to the bottom of his solid gold coffin. After opening this coffin, these three nested coffins, after opening it, when he finally reached the mummy, Carter saw that the ritual raisins had hardened. Raisins are sticky, flammable organic substance insoluble in water. Just like a pine tree, it has a raisin. So these ritual raisins had hardened, they have become very hard, and they were cementing that to the bottom of this coffin. Cementing means fixed with cement. And here it refers to the strength, how hard it looked. It is cemented, it is glued to the bottom of this coffin, this gold solid coffin. Solid means hard or firm, stable in shape, not liquid. No amount of legitimate force could move them, Carter wrote later. What was to be done? So Carter was wondering what to do because it looked impossible to move these raisins, to move the mummy without damaging it. The sun can be down like a hammer this far south in Egypt, and Carter tried to use it to loosen the raisins. The sun can be down like a hammer. It means it can be very strong. This far south in Egypt. And what did Carter try to do? He tried to use the sun to loosen the raisins, to melt the raisins. To loosen means to make something less tight or firm. For several hours, he set the mummy outside in the blazing sunshine that heated it to 149 degrees Fahrenheit. What did Carter do? He put the mummy outside in the blazing sunshine. Blazing means very hot and very heated. He was hoping the raisins will melt. This sunshine heated it to 149 degrees Fahrenheit. But nothing budged. To budge means to move or shift. Nothing shifted or melted. There was no change. He reported with a scientific detachment that the consolidated material had to be chiseled away from beneath the limbs and trunk before it was possible to raise the king's remains. Carter reported with scientific detachment. Detachment means the state of being objective. He reported with this scientific detachment, being very objective, that this consolidated material, consolidated means strong, something which has gone very strong, to make something physically solid or strong. So he reported that this consolidated material, this thickened material, had to be chiseled away. To chisel away means to separate with a chisel. Chisel is a long-bladed hand tool with a cutting edge. It is used to cut or shape wood, metal, or stone. So what he was reporting was that this material had to be chiseled away. It had to be removed with a chisel from beneath the limbs, arms and legs, and the trunk before it was possible to raise the king's remains. Without chiseling away this consolidated material, this hardened material, Carter was saying it will not be possible to take the remains out of the coffin. It will not be possible to raise the king's remains. This is what Carter reported. Next time we will see what happened to the mummy. What happened to the world's most famous mummy? Tomorrow we will also discuss the map and we will see it a bit closely. Dear students, this is all for today. Have a nice day and see you soon.